Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London. It is August 29th, 2024, and I'm wearing a Quest 3 headset with V69 software running David's VR Studios with hand tracking and meta avatars. We'll be back on Tuesday with VR Gamescast, and thank you so very much to our members and patrons for supporting our work directly. You can become. Did it start right there, David? Because I got the red box a minute into that. Did it catch all that?
I think you started, yeah. I think you can just keep going.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much to our members and patrons for supporting our work directly. You can become a member at uploadvr.com and find us on your podcast platform of choice. I saw it in our comments here, people thinking we might go 3 hours. I see people in Denver, Colorado, Sweden, and all sorts of other places watching us today. Thank you for tuning in. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So I'm actually just back from a holiday or vacation, as Americans would say, about 1 hour ago. So I've just caught up with the weekly news. One of the pieces I did write on my phone while I was on holiday, so I kind of briefed up on that. But we're going to talk about four things today. We're going to talk about, firstly, the PlayStation VR 2 getting a price hike in Japan following its deep discount not being extended. So we'll quickly talk about that. We'll then talk about the information's report that Jio, India's largest mobile network and one of their big tech companies, is in talks with Meta about the idea of making a cheap Horizon OS headset for India. So that could expand consumer VR into the most populous country on the planet. The third topic we will talk about is AppLab being merged into the Meta Horizon Store, which is the new name for the more open Quest Store. No longer a distinction between AppLab and Main Store. It's now all just one big store. Finally, we will talk about we talk about what's in the title of the video, the big topic. The information is reporting that Meta cancelled the Quest Pro 2 headset it had planned for 2027 and instead plans an ultralight headset with a tethered puck for that year, 2027, instead. So, if the information's reporting is accurate there, those are some dramatic changes in the kind of other headset product line Meta wants to have out there in addition to the mainline Quests.
Yeah, it does sound like I started mid-sentence there at the beginning of this episode. So if I missed it, it's August 29th, and I'm wearing a Quest 3 here. Yeah, and
I think he
we
said
will build up to that final topic as usual. I don't think it's going to be a 3 hour episode though. Um, and yeah, we also had the Spark AR canceled. It's kind of funny how it's a blip on our radar VR wise to see Spark AR disappear. So I know people are mentioning that out there. But we'll move through this pretty quickly, and then I think we'll have a big discussion on that last subject. David, why don't we get into this first one?
Well, firstly, I just want to say Spark AR is something I do want to cover. Like I just said, I've been on holiday for the past week, and if I wasn't, I would have covered it. And we definitely are going to cover it for the reason that originally Meta was actually going to use Spark as the engine for Quest 3's Augment. And now we learned earlier in the year that there was a big strategy shift there, and we'll probably see more about that at Connect. The other thing I was just going to point out is that Onikaz, he didn't say you started midway into your sentence. It was just the first word. I think literally the midway into the first word. So I don't think you need to repeat yourself there. I think people heard you well. But yeah, let's talk straight about PlayStation VR 2, our first topic. This isn't a massive piece of news because this only applies to Japan, of course, but it's still indicative of Sony kind of moving in the wrong direction, you might argue, in that in Japan they have increased the price of PlayStation VR 2 from around the equivalent of $520 to around the equivalent of 620. So this comes just a month after in the West, Sony had this massive discount on PlayStation VR 2. We talked about it on this show. We reported about it on uploadvr.com. And what we saw then was the PlayStation VR 2 sales skyrocketed. So Sony has the signal and the information here that price matters a lot. We've talked about it so many times in this show about how price matters in the context of this headset and in all headsets. But in Japan, they've gone the opposite direction. Now, to be fair, this isn't just the PSVR 2. They're also increasing the price of PlayStation 5 in Japan. And they say that all of this is because of the impact of recent changes in the global economy and challenging external influences on our business. So it looks like Sony, not only doesn't have the will to reduce the price of this and perhaps even subsidize it in certain markets to spur growth in the VR market, they're actually in their own home turf of Japan, they're actually increasing it, which just seems bizarre to me.
We've got the PS5 Pro allegedly around the corner. We will have to see how that stacks up, what capabilities it brings. I will I will dig back into my hypothesizing history with you telling me that I'm right for the wrong reasons here, that I still would love a PS5 Pro that runs Steam. Right. Go ahead and tell me how wrong I am and how that will never happen. I want it. And now would be a great time to do it, but that'll probably never happen. And uh, depending on what happens there with PS5 Pro, I think that'll determine the future of the PSVR 2 or PSVR product line overall.
Yeah, I've also seen those reports that suggest the PS5 Pro is imminent, and I do wonder what kind of support is Sony going to give to PSVR 2 there? Obviously, it's going to run PSVR 2, but what we're wondering here is, will there be an automatic resolution increase for all PlayStation VR 2 games, driven by eye-tracked foveated rendering, of course, and the games to support it? Or is this something that each developer is going to have to release a patch for? Are we going to see perhaps the ability for some apps that currently run with reprojection from 60 to 120? One of the things I really criticized in my PSVR 2 review, their reprojection technology is just not suitable for 60 to 120 in many cases. You do get a visible motion blur. I wonder, will we see some of those titles move from 60 to 90, 60 reprojected to 120 up to a smooth, solid 90 frames per second that doesn't use reprojection? I would love to see developers do that instead of push resolution if that's all they can do. But I'm really curious to see what happens on a platform level there. Is any of this going to be automatic, or is it all going to be patches?
I appreciated Onakazi's response to my daydreaming there of Steam on a PS5 Pro. Speaking for you, I think a little bit, David, was saying I would like to be able to fly with just the power of thought. And then Quentin talking about that this isn't the games cast, but their excitement for Batman Arkham Shadow. We just had our first impressions over on the games cast delivered by Don Hopper, who flew out to check that out. Very, very cool moment for him in our studio to have him share those comments with our audience. It's cool to see a lot of people in this audience sharing that audience, but we have people who prefer one show or the other. Like they tune into one, they just want to hear games, or they just want to hear our broader stuff. And it's cool to see that everyone's sharing. Like I see familiar names in the audience, but there's also people who just tune into one or the other. Hello to Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, in our comments. You say something noteworthy, we might just read it out. David, anything else here we should talk about before we move on?
Yeah, two comments here I want to read out. One from LL pointing out a third possibility. So I talked about how PS5 Pro could increase resolution or frame rate for PSVR 2 games, but LL is pointing out that many of the rumors around PS5 Pro suggest that it's going to have its own neural supersampling technology, similar to the kind of DLSS you see on NVIDIA cards on PC and on other platforms. We're seeing a lot of these PC-based platforms get this neural upscaling. It looks like PS5 Pro is going to support that, and that's something that would obviously be great if it could just be on automatically by default in PSVR 2 games. That's another big question. Will that be supported? But that could be a big boost because yes, that matters for your TV. It's nice to get a higher resolution to go from, 1440p to 4K or whatever, but that's close to the level of diminishing returns at typical living room distance, right? I'm not saying you won't see the difference. I'm just saying where it really matters is in VR, where these pixels are magnified over your field of view, and we still have so far to go to get to human vision. We're so far to go. So all of these little increases, resolution and neural upscaling, could have a huge benefit. And more broadly, I expect that's something we'll probably see come to standalone headsets in the later half of the decade, because that could be a huge sort of force multiplier in these mobile chipsets to be able to do neural upscaling on device.
Yeah, I'm looking at the last three subjects we have today, and they're all meta related. And that's going to end up forming the basis of the last half of our show. So I want to encourage any comments out there from people who don't want to hear about meta, want to talk about Sony, want to talk about other things right now, because it's going to be a whole lot of meta talk from here on out. And we always want to respect that there's a larger world out there than the things that are just happening on Meta's headsets.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a comment here from Onakazi saying that the price increase in Japan for PSVR 2 and PS5 may be more related to the yen being weak for a long time and sort of a reaction to that. And yes, it's very much so valid to say that there are probably valid economic reasons, like Sony points out. It's just without context, it's disappointing because what we've seen to be successful in that sale is just that price coming down will actually be what helps PS VR2 grow, not going up. And it's just very unfortunate to see.
And then there's Quentin, a member of the podcast for a very long time. Thank you so much for your support. Asking or commenting, why would anyone think the PS5 Pro will do anything for PSVR 2 since Sony has made it clear they don't care about VR? No first-party games announced. It's very, very difficult to, like, I get the sentiment. It feels right, but you've got to recognize that Sony at large is still a major supplier of everyone else, right? Like, it's still making and visible how much money is available to be made in the VR market to Sony. Like, it knows how much money can be made in this market. That's not a surprise to the company. The question is whether there's a cohesive strategy or where they go with their strategy in the future.
Yeah, I think specifically with PS5 Pro, the answer I would give to Quentin's question of why would anyone think that it will do anything for VR is that it costs a lot less to release a patch for an existing game that just, increases resolution or frame rate or maybe some textures and things like that than it does to make an entirely new game. So the cost for Sony to release a completely new, presumably AAA VR game is enormous, and the cost for them to just patch Horizon Call of the Mountain and Gran Turismo 7 and pay some developers to patch things, that's a lot less. So I do think developers are going to take advantage of that, right? As long as they are not completely shut down. We've seen this happen in the past when PS4 Pro came out. Plenty of developers released a resolution update. I think we'll probably see the same here. Just to come back on Ian's point about, we're going to talk a lot about meta today, and I'm sure that does frustrate a certain subset of people. I think LL makes a good point here in the comments saying that people not wanting meta talk in VR is like people ignoring Apple for smartphones. I think that's true. It's also the analogy I often make when we've been asked in the past, why is all of your coverage this week or most of it about meta? It's in the same way that like 5 years ago, if you were an electric car magazine, the vast majority of your coverage would be about Tesla, right? It's like whatever the company that is releasing the most products to the most people and updating them at the fastest pace is obviously going to be what a news website and news show covers. And the reality is that right now, this is starting to change, and that's great. But right now, Meta is still the company that is, selling the most VR headsets, updating them every single month, releasing and funding AAA games. And there was a period back in roughly 2021, 2022 when Quest 2 had just came out and it was flying off the shelves, and we hadn't even had PlayStation VR 2 yet, and everything was just meta. Well, it was Oculus Quest 2, and we're actually starting to leave that era now. We're seeing Apple come out with Vision Pro. We expect Samsung to announce its headset later this year. Pico is coming with a strong offering with Pico 4 Ultra. We're seeing Visor on September 19th. I'm going to see Visor to let you know how real it is or isn't. So we're starting to really see a kind of crack in the stagnation there, to borrow a quote. You're muted, Ian.
I don't want to derail us too much here, but I am using multitasking on Quest right now. I have my Raspberry Pi Linux desktop floating right here with the UploadVR homepage, and Blue Sky over here in a web app window on my Raspberry Pi with a keyboard in front of me and a mouse that I can change Bluetooth connection to the headset directly or to control the Raspberry Pi. It's a neat little setup that prior to Vision Pro launching earlier this year was more or less science fiction because of the software barriers between doing that and actually like getting to your content, like logging into your websites. Even like right now, this whole little setup I've got, I'm using Chromium instead of Chrome, which means that I don't have access, really easy access to my passwords right now because I'm not logging into my Google account, so I don't have my passwords in there. There's this layer of things that as soon as you strip them away, they also become useful to have back as displays. And that's what I have right now. Well, Apple Vision Pro did this earlier this year, and now MetaQuest is really going crazy with general purpose personal computing from your VR headset. And we're gonna have to spend some time unfolding this for people, David, because it's almost like, did Meta do this on purpose? Hold back its platform until this moment so that it could learn from Apple and actually figure out what mistakes not to make there, or what mistakes they've already made that they need to correct for. It's just these companies are learning from each other in real time, and the theme of the story is VR headsets are the basis of their next generation personal computers. And we need to kind of like keep repeating that to our audience, because when you accept that general purpose personal computers are the most advanced personal computers available from Meta and Apple. Now, you can't get an M4 inside of the Apple Vision Pro, and you can't get face tracking and eye tracking out of the $500 MetaQuest 3. But the software shackles have been thrown away from the things that these standalone headsets haven't been able to do for years. And everyone out there, like our longtime viewers, they felt that magic in a PC headset. They felt like Oculus already bulldozed Oculus Homes that gave people a lot of the functionality that they are getting back today on standalone computers. But it had to be rebuilt from the ground up as an open personal computer as the basis of everything. So we're going to keep talking about Meta, but we're in this phase where like just everything is going to be going in every possible direction because of like it's now the competition is to be who is going to be the safest and the most open in VR headsets.
Yeah, so we have a question from Anakazi in the comments asking, did we cover the particular setup that Ian is talking about with this Raspberry Pi in an article? And the answer is, this is essentially a tease of an article that I believe you plan for tomorrow, if I'm correct there, that should be detailing this.
Yeah, probably either today or tomorrow. Yes, and has Ian tried the travesty that Demio is on Apple Vision Pro to compare to what you get on the Quest 3? I went in there day one and could not get a match going with another player and wrote to Resolution Games and said, "What is this?" And they're like, "Well, we don't. It's just a you problem," was more or less the takeaway I got from that, and I haven't touched it since. But that was a bad first experience with Demio and Apple Vision Pro, and I haven't touched it. The reason I said safest is also related to another article I'm talking about right now. That's going to be the argument. They're going to try to argue that they're safe to use, and there's different ways to think about that. What safety is in VR, right? Apple Vision Pro, you have to turn off all the safety features that are on by default. And those safety features are actually pretty substantial. Active understanding of people moving in your room is a big thing that you can't get out of Quest headsets right now. And then there's the features that Meta's rolling out right now. They're trying to get preteens into Horizon Social Worlds, 10 to 13-year-olds. That's another tease of another article that's being worked on right now. But they're trying to get younger people into Horizon Worlds with per person and per experience permissions to be granted by parents to the users of headsets. You put that in tandem with the idea that the first phone many people get is their iPad or Android phone with a video calling app installed. Like VR headsets are closing that gap and getting to be one-to-one communication devices along with all the rest, and it's just all happening all at once.
Yeah, I think we're almost ready to move on to the second topic. Firstly, I'm going to answer a question from Sirius Goo, a member, who asks, can the Studio app that we're in right now be ported to Apple Vision Pro? Would be much better, question mark. So yes, it could. Apple Vision Pro supports Unity. The main problem there is that there are some costs associated there that don't exist in Quest, and we can't really financially justify those costs at the moment. The other issue is fully immersive apps like this don't get access to eye tracking or face tracking on Vision Pro. So you wouldn't be able to get foveated rendering. So that's not meaningfully allowing us to crazily increase the resolution. But more importantly, you wouldn't be able to drive the avatars with eye and face tracking, right? It would just be the same experience right now as if to a fully immersive app on Vision Pro, the headset doesn't have eye or face tracking. It's not something that those apps are able to access yet. It's another thing, again, about what Ian was just talking about, this balance between uh, performance and power, both for users and developers, versus safety, where Apple is saying, if we give developers access to eye tracking and face tracking, they could do nefarious things with it and hurt you as the user. And obviously, the counter argument to that is, I, the user, the owner of this $3,500 device, should be the one to decide what developers are allowed to do with my face tracking and eye tracking data. But Apple is going to be Apple there. And for the foreseeable future, it's decided that only it gets to use your eye tracking and face tracking in its apps only.
Yeah, so Keith Godin describing a very difficult concept that it's honestly made me feel pretty uncomfortable as well. The idea that Meta has tried to get closer and closer to a younger audience with VR headsets over the years. And we saw it happen last year. They officially changed the minimum age on Quest headsets from 13 to 10. And we went face to face with Meta executives at Connect last year and asked basically what changed. Why did you think this was time? And I don't recall getting a meaningful answer. It was just we've done the work was more or less the response. And I that didn't feel clear of just why do you think this is safe? And I we've touched on this subject before, but I think we really need to, like, Rec Room has junior accounts, and they've had junior accounts for a really long time. And those Rec Room junior accounts don't have access to messages, and they don't have access to friending, and they have randomized usernames, as well as you can't invite people back to private dorm room instances. It's really difficult to think about the initial design of these systems and how they're built to, like, keep you in for as long as humanly possible. Like, Horizon Worlds is a playground. VR Chat is a playground. Rec Room is a playground. And these systems are mixing every possible age group. And if you don't, like, it's really difficult to think of parents who approach these devices as the same as any traditional computing device. David, we've gone back and forth on this. The same thing is true. The bad things that happen with phones are going to happen with VR headsets. The problem is you're embodied in a VR headset, and it can make what happens to you feel more visceral and real. And that is extremely, extremely upsetting to think of parents not realizing the impact of feeling embodied inside a headset and then unleashing them with voice chat and private instances. Well, Meta is rolling out those tools in opposition, some ways, to what Rec Room and VR Chat are ready to do, because Meta has the resources to moderate and police those locations if they really prioritize it. But as you've been so good about pointing out, David, are they going to follow through? Are any of these platforms going to follow through on protecting and keeping their user base safe? And it's a very, very scary thing. Even though Meta is, like, putting the right tools in place, how many parents are actually going to use them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think a lot of this is the same with certain traditional platforms with only some slight differences, right? Plenty of kids play Roblox today, plenty play on Minecraft servers. This isn't a fundamentally new idea for society. In many ways, it's going to depend on, do parents use the parental control tools available to them? The big issue with a lot of iPads is that because Apple doesn't even allow multiple user accounts, the parent sets it up with their account. The parental controls there are then very limited because Apple wants you to buy an iPad for every single family member, not share it. And so the kid ends up going on the parent's iPad. Usually the worst case scenario is actually that they sit and spend their parents' credit card on in-app purchases. But obviously there are also very real safety risks there. With Quest, there is the ability to lock an account and have child accounts that are separate to the parental account, just like on a PC where it does matter about which parental controls you use. I think we do need to look into more detail what exactly the implementation is for preteen accounts in Horizon. I don't even know if voice chat is enabled, for example. I've been away for a week. I haven't had time to read up on this. And I think, as you say, you're working on an article for this, and we can discuss that next week once you get that article out with details on this.
Sure. I'm just going to make a general statement here, though, that I think casting is a necessary feature for young people in VR. I think that should be a necessary across all headsets. If you've putting a young person in VR, the headset should start casting what it sees to a nearby device by default. You can turn it off, but I think by default, you should be able to monitor what's happening in the headset on a nearby device. I'd like to see that become more commonplace. And I'm seeing Afro Badger in the comments talking about joining in VR. Well, this is also, if you only have one headset, this would be the equivalent. And I'd really like to see that increase in use. But as David says, yes, these features are rolling out in real time, and we are going to have to parse apart the permissions and exactly how they work. And let's move on to the App Lab, because I think, we've got Geo right first
there, because that is something you do, right? If you set up a preteen account for a child, you do it on the Meta Horizon app on the parent's phone. And all they have to do is open the Meta Horizon app and hit the cast button, and they now see what their kid's doing. I don't think, how could that be any easier? What's the specific barrier you think that could be lowered to seeing, and you open an app and press the cast headset view button?
Sure. And I mean, you're putting people in headsets who might not know how to read well first. Like and I say that is messed up because you're talking about 10-year-olds according to Meta's policies, but we know that people are putting younger people inside these headsets all the time. So like, you can't assume that the cast button is going to be readable by the person who's going to hit the button, or even which button to hit. Like,
it's on the parents' phone side, right? It's you can,
so that the command center, that's a good point. Okay, so, and that's a very, very good point about Horizon, the phone app, right? And that's part of the Horizon Worlds platform potential here, is right. Horizon Worlds runs on phones, web, in VR, and out. It runs on everything. So it would be very easy for Meta to build this functionality in as a standard practice of just the moment your kid is in VR, the phone is letting you see what they see.
Yeah, I do think Paul Tuff's comment here really points to my view here, which is a lot of this is an issue of parent tech literacy. Something I've heard is done in schools in certain countries is that they actually take parents in for a parents' night, where they sit them down and they have a IT expert come in and give them a presentation of how to use parental control tools. They show, here's the iPad parental controls, here's how you set those up, here's the Windows parental controls for your kid's PC, here's if you have an Xbox or PlayStation, how to restrict them to certain age groups and restrict certain features as a parent. And over time, MetaQuest headsets are the number one free app on the App Store on Christmas Day, which is suggesting that it's a huge gift for kids. I think we're not too far away to a future where, if more schools did do this, teach parents about how these parental controls work, that MetaQuest headsets could be included as part of these education. If parents are just willing to go to school for a night, listen to a presentation, maybe take home a leaflet or something that explains this to them, I think that would obviously be a lot of help. Because I do think a huge amount of this issue is just that, whether it be Quest or an iPad or a Nintendo Switch or an Xbox, parents just aren't educated on how to use these tools that are built into these platforms.
Yep. Very good notes. Well, I think we need to move on to our next subject here. We got a half hour out of that first subject, so we are right on pace for 2 hours, which we really shouldn't do today because of the news, and we should get back to writing. So let's talk about this Meta segment we've got going. What is this bit of news, David?
Yeah, so this is one of 3 reports from the information we'll be talking about today. The latter 2 we'll talk about at the end of the show, but the first one comes before it, and it claims that Meta is in talks with Geo, or you could say Geo is in talks with Meta, about making a cheap Horizon OS headset for India. So this would be Geo hardware running Horizon OS, which, if you aren't aware, if you've been living under a virtual rock, is the new name for the MetaQuest operating system that Meta plans to make available on third-party headsets. So Meta so far has said that Asus and Lenovo will be building Horizon OS headsets. And now this report suggests that if this deal goes through, Geo could be making a cheap one for India. If you don't know what Jio is, it's India's largest mobile network. They're also one of India's biggest consumer tech companies. They have an e-commerce platform, digital payment service, ecosystem of app-based services, including messaging platform, streaming service, and gaming platform. In 2020, Meta took a 10% stake in Jio, so there is a connection here. Mark Zuckerberg is also reportedly a personal friend of Jio's controlling shareholder, who happens to be one of the richest people in India, one of the richest people in Asia, I believe, and the richest person in India specifically. So Jio is not a stranger to these kind of tech deals. Currently, Jio partners with Google to sell a $50 Android phone. That's crazy. A fully functional 4G Android phone for $50 that it obviously packages with all of its services to make money back instead of on the hardware. So I wonder if we could see this Jio headset have all of these Jio services, their messaging platform, their streaming service with downloads, their gaming platform, their e-commerce, their digital payments, all of this packed into a cheap headset that is sold near cost that runs, Meta's core software in the Horizon store. The other significant thing about Jio that would make this an interesting play is that they have 1,800 physical retail stores throughout India. So this could be the way that many Indians are introduced to good VR for the first time. And as a reminder, as I said in the first segment, India recently overtook China to become the most populous country on the planet. So this would expand consumer VR to the most populous country on the planet. And this could mean millions of new customers for current Horizon OS developers, i.e. Quest developers.
Yeah, so I think the possibilities are enormous. This isn't the first time we've seen global attempts to route globally. When I think of the game Civilization, which I believe Mark Zuckerberg is a fan of, I think of the way you can sort of get settlements on two parts of a continent, and then let those settlements grow to encircle another city in between your two settlements, and then consume them over time. I think of that strategy when I think of things like this, of trying to get a global footprint for your headsets, or even a global footprint for your services like WhatsApp. And so there's a lot of opportunity here for Meta. And we've also in the past pointed this out, but we need to keep pointing it out too. A low-cost VR headset as your first personal computer is world-changing, and it works. It gives you privacy in places where you might be surrounded by hundreds or thousands of people, and in a place with lots of people and very little money, that's a potentially, a window to privacy anywhere you have it, is something you might not have experienced in certain places of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. John Carmack pointed this out multiple times about the potential of VR in megacities, for example, Mumbai, where you might be living in a multi-family or even just a single family home where you're sharing the main television with up to a dozen other people. So if you have this low-cost headset that gives you your own personal cinema screen and the ability to play, immersive VR apps and go into social VR platforms, you kind of get this ability to have personal entertainment in your own bedroom or even just bed that then really, really multiplies the kind of digital freedom that you're able to have. And especially, again, as Carmack pointed out, if you're in a mega city where this argument of, oh, well, VR can't replace going outside. There's not a lot of great outside places to go in some of these mega cities. People are spending, their time between work and in a very cramped living condition. And that's why if Jio can get a headset out at a low enough cost to be compelling in the Indian market, this could be a huge game changer. A market where we know already that this concept is successful. This idea that, your VR headset gives you the ability to escape cramped conditions is Tokyo. Meta has said on multiple occasions that Oculus Go was a huge success in Tokyo, as is Quest 2 and Quest 3. They have seen surprising success in that market, particularly for this reason. So if you look at some of India's megacities, you could see the same thing happening. What I wonder here is about how exactly they were going to get the cost down. Because when it comes to that $50 Android phone, they use this low-end Qualcomm chipset, like a low-end one. But that's not really applicable to mixed reality headsets. They could theoretically go and use Quest 2's old chipset, but then the amount of Horizon content that supported Horizon Store, I mean, would be lower and lower over time. Maybe that's an acceptable trade-off to hit a low cost. It also means you probably couldn't do the kind of mixed reality that is going to be compelling in Quest 3S. I just wonder to what extent this will be different from a Quest 3S, that headset we expect Meta to soon announce, which we already think is going to be like the cheapest XR2 Gen 2 thing you can get out there, right? Just a single LCD panel, some Fresnel lenses, an XR2 Gen 2, some speakers, and the minimum sensor suite for mixed reality. Perhaps this will just be like an even more cheap material, slightly lower resolution LCD, maybe even cheaper aspheric lenses version of Quest 3S. I'm very interested to see, but I must again point out that the report here is just saying they are in talks about this, not that they have a solidified product plan yet.
Yeah, I appreciated David's qualifier there at the end that number one, this isn't necessarily confirmed yet. And then the idea that's in the back of my mind that also needs qualification is these things are always they're always plans until they actually happen. I think that's really, really key. I've gone back and forth. I've got a kitty here that doesn't want to get down. So if my hands are doing weird things, it's the kitty again. So if you've got people that I lost my train of thought there because kitty, darn it. It's a very hard to imagine all of these things coming to pass. All the Meta headsets that they said are coming in the future. The idea that a Samsung headset powered by Android is going to arrive. Like there was a moment, if you go back into history books, where you had Blu-ray and HD DVD, and one company made a deal with a whole bunch of other companies, and it killed the competing format while the competing format was ready to make all of its own announcements. That's the kind of period we're in right now with these various platforms trying to convince an audience out there that they have the best of all possible worlds, right? You don't want to launch a headset in this year that doesn't connect to Steam VR in some way, shape, or form. But Meta is trying to make the case that you also don't want to get a headset in 2024, 2025 that doesn't connect to Horizon Worlds in some way, shape, or form. Well, now you've got two things from two different companies that you're going to come to a headset and go, I don't want to get this without these two things. Can I get these two things? And they're all going to try to differentiate from there.
Yeah, I think for now, what Meta's real strength there is in making sure that it's the headset that has the games that you can't get on Vision Pro or on Android XR on the upcoming Samsung headset. Right now, whether it be Beat Saber or Population 1 or the upcoming Batman AAA game, Meta is trying to solidify titles in the gaming space. Now, that's a lot more of a challenge when you say, is there anything compelling about Horizon OS outside of gaming that would mean that it has like a platform lock-in? And I don't think Meta has gotten anywhere near there yet, right? Horizon Worlds is getting more popular, but it's certainly not the kind of thing that would sell or not sell a headset or convince you to not switch to a different platform. Meta is obviously trying to build up features, but I think Meta's real strategy here for lock-in really almost isn't even on the user side. It's kind of on the developer side, because if this goes through, as I said, there would be millions of new Horizon OS users. And Meta is hoping to say to developers, look, you can go and develop for that $2,000 or $3,500 headset that has a couple of 100,000 users, and you can make a little bit of money, or you can go develop for our platform, which has tens of millions of users, and make some real money. And that's, to be clear, Meta's pitch, how they would pitch it. The scale of their platform means that you can get quality through quantity, because the funding that comes in can be larger because there's a larger total addressable audience. And I think that's what these kind of plans are about. It's just making this Horizon OS platform so big that even if Vision OS is the better software and the better experience, if you do think that, or even if Android XR comes out and it's a more polished version of this and it does the multitasking and Android app thing better, Meta's just going to say, our platform has the reach and scale that none of these platforms are going to get for many years. But there will definitely be a period where this is the competition, right? It's like, for a while, there will be this three-way format war, platform war, whatever way you want to pitch it. And I don't think we're anywhere near the level of consumers actually having a particular attachment to one, other than if you're an Apple ecosystem user, you're going to pick the Apple headset if you can afford it many of the times because you have all that integration. But when it comes to who's going to be the number two, who's going to be the Apple alternative, like Windows was for PCs and like Android is for smartphones, I think that battle is still left to win. It's anyone's game to win over the next decade, not just the next year.
Yeah, Paul Tuff mentioned that Sony won the HD DVD versus Blu-ray war using consoles, films, and loads of other mediums and devices. And we're in the midst of that with licensing agreements for things like H.265 and trying to get, we're even encountering some of these things with the HDMI link not working for high definition copywritten content. So this, I guess, it's a good little segue into our next subject here as we build to the last subject of the day. Another pitch here to become a member or patron at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. But I think this is related in the idea that AppLab content is now merged with the Meta Horizon Store, which is, of course, the new name for the Quest Store. So I liked the comment on, what was it, Guy Godin suggesting that the sentiment of just when will Meta abandon Horizon Worlds, at the same time that the executive leadership at Meta is saying this is actually good now, basically. Like, we've put in enough, this is actually decent. There's still the impression amongst a lot of people that this thing is actually poison and needs to die. I don't know who's right here. I don't know who's got there's everything we said earlier in the show about it being such an uncomfortable thing the moment you go into one of these lobbies and get screamed at, right? Like, you don't want that experience, and they're pushing it on every single user on every single surface they have. Well, now they're pushing every kind of content. You just have to clear a few basic checks on the pass through your bit of software being put onto the Meta Store, and boom, it can be out in front of millions of people. David, why don't you break this down as well?
Yeah, so we've got two separate things there. Firstly, on the Horizon Worlds question that kind of led us into this, as LL points out in the comments, objectively, Horizon Worlds used to be, if you looked at the top most currently played Quest apps, it used to be way down in the 30s or 40s and sometimes at best in the 20s a couple of years ago. And now, as LL points out, it's pretty much always in the top 7. So objectively, Meta is actually seeing Horizon Worlds get more and more popular significantly. If anything, they're putting more investment in it than ever. They now hire professional game studios to build worlds in Horizon Worlds rather than just depending on users. So they have their own internal studio called Uro Interactive, I think, and they've been contracting out some existing VR development studios. If anything, they're actually putting more and more investment into Horizon Worlds. So if one day they do abandon it, it's not going to be anytime soon, and they're hoping that they can build on that success and keep, getting more and more higher fidelity worlds. We talked a few weeks ago about how they have that major avatar graphics overhaul coming up to make the avatars look a lot more realistic. And I imagine we'll hear a lot about Horizon Worlds at Meta Connect. But our topic here is the Horizon Store. This is all getting very confusing because Horizon used to just mean Horizon Worlds. Now it's just Meta's term for its first party VR and mixed reality software in general. So the Horizon Store is just a new name for the Quest Store. And they've made a big difference alongside that new name. And as Ian pointed out, it's that there's no longer a concept of AppLab. If you're not a Quest user, AppLab was this system of having unlisted apps where developers who weren't approved to the full store had their app on the system, but the only way you could find it if you were searching for it was to search its exact name. Couldn't even just be one word, or you couldn't even do 29 out of 30 characters. You had to do its exact name and then find it by scrolling down, and you would get this big warning, AppLab is unlisted. That's changed. Now they have got rid of the concept of AppLab. All the apps that were AppLab are now just on the Quest Store, the Horizon Store. I've got it wrong already. And in place for developers who do want to say, my app isn't quite ready for full distribution, they've added an early access tag that developers can slap onto their content, which is, of course, the same thing that Steam does. You're on Steam, you see early access, that game isn't quite ready. Meta's doing the same strategy as Steam, following along. And we talked about this so many times in this show. The reason is that Meta pre-announced it all the way back in April. Then they announced it was going to happen at the start of August, and that didn't happen. And then finally, just now in the past week or so, they've actually made it happen. So I'm going to say what I've said before, and I'll say that because I'm sure there are people watching who weren't watching back then. And it's that there's a huge advantage here and a huge disadvantage. The huge advantage is that this allows for innovative apps that change the game and come up with new ideas that Meta's curator czars didn't understand to get rapid popularity, right? So Gorilla Tag used to be on App Lab because Meta's curators didn't really understand it. And now it's the most popular content on the entire platform. We're going to see other innovative titles come straight onto the store and explode in popularity. So that's great for developer innovation. It means you don't have to sit and worry, should I pump all of this money into building this app if maybe Meta's content people will never understand it and never approve it? That's no longer a concern. You're being put out into the open market. If people like it, they'll like it. If they don't, they don't. Obviously, the huge disadvantage there is that the Steam problem, right? The store is going to be flooded with a lot of low effort shovelware, and that's going to kind of dilute the discoverability for the really great apps. Obviously, there are recommendation algorithms that try to prioritize quality, but in general, when you're searching through categories, you're going to see a solo developer's 2-week project alongside a team of 25 people's 4-year passion of love. You're going to see all these things on the same store, and that's going to have disadvantages and advantages. And this is a major, major change for Meta's platform.
Yeah, with art that's copied by a style transfer algorithm, a tool to make the product that was built by one person look like the product that was built like 25, naming, everything. It's race to the bottom. So over on the Apple Store, I've brought this example up a lot. Back at the App Store launch back in 2008 for iPhone, they had this curated list of, 20 or so apps. There were some games, there were some messaging services, and they all launched on day one, and the prices were like $15 or something like that, $15-20 to get a game. And just whittling down over years, you saw the price of the average game on the App Store go from $10 and then to $5 and then finally $1.99 and then 99 cents and then free ad supported. It drilled down year after year after year. Well, like Meta doesn't want that to happen to their platform outside their control. They want to use, they want to benefit from every single dollar spent all the way to the horizon. So I hate using their own terminology in that literal way, but they do kind of, there's this, the theme here amongst our audience is they've used this horizon naming for all the projects that are 5 years out. And then they just kill the ones that don't work, and the ones that live on become horizon. Like that's what they name the thing. And that's what we've been left with after this process of whittling down is horizon built for the future. But the thing that I get stuck on is, how does it feel on headsets 2 to 3 years from now to have this system that forces you to always be interacting with server-based worlds? Like that's what this is discussing, or what I'm conceptualizing. How does it feel to constantly always have to connect to a world off-site to load up all your assets and get into it? Are they going to do really good caching of local worlds here on Horizon so that doesn't happen? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Because I went into that air hockey world, David. I love the air hockey world, that Questies. So if anyone remembers, they announced, they did a big, what was it, Super Bowl ad? I can't remember where they premiered that ad, but they had a big push where they announced Questies as this arcade location in VR. And I went in there and filmed people going around, and they had an air hockey table. And it was one of the laggiest experiences that I've ever experienced in my life to hit one of these air hockey things and have it go around the table and come back. Like, that is an interesting concept, bit of physics, code to have embodied in that thing. But if you and I aren't getting as good an experience out of that table as if we had gone to a physical location, then it's always going to be an inferior. It's always going to like wear thin pretty quickly after a few playthroughs.
Yeah, so 3 points there. Firstly, as the commenters pointed out, I think it was James O'Loughlin, and that was a dad joke there, all the way to the horizon. Very good there. Secondly, I think this Horizon branding being confusing is kind of embodied in your response there because, we started talking about the Horizon store, which is just the Quest store, and then you're straight on to talking about, multiplayer world, which is Horizon Worlds. There really is going to be a significant amount of confusion here about what this even means. So, this Horizon store we're talking about, these are just regular apps, right? These aren't networked worlds. What you mean is Horizon Worlds, which is the Horizon Worlds platform that has existed for a few years now. And I think your broader point is definitely right to say, how is the flooding of all of these free apps going to change the economic model here? Will we see that same thing happen with iPhone, where currently one of the key aspects of Quest is that the store feels like a video games console store, where you have these apps that cost 20, 30, 40, sometimes even up to $60 that are trying to be these big meaty experiences. And could it be possible that we'll see, as you say, a race to the bottom where you try to see clones of these major apps that cut the price in half for an experience that's about half as good, and then you get people going for those and not even trying the better experience because it's cheaper? And eventually, well, you see the same thing happening with iPhone, where everything races down to $0 but supported with ads or supported with in-app payments. That's a trend we could see. And then the broader point becomes, absolutely, do we then see Horizon Worlds, these on-demand server-based worlds, come in and compete directly with those? Will there be a Horizon World for Walkabout Mini Golf, for example, that basically does the same thing but for free, for Golf Plus, for 11 Table Tennis? And as you do point out, again, a lot of the issue will be there. How good is the Horizon World's core tech? Can it duplicate that? The one thing I would say is Questies was, 3 years ago now, maybe 2 years ago. And that is one of the things I do have to stress, that the people out there who think that Horizon Worlds is still junk, I wager most of them haven't actually tried it in the last 2 years. The extent to which the core tech of Horizon Worlds and the quality of the curated and developer created worlds have changed from 2 or 3 years ago, it's night and day. So a lot of people's idea of Horizon Worlds is still that cringy Mark Zuckerberg selfie with the low poly Eiffel Tower in the background. Load up Horizon Worlds on your Quest today if you have one, or look for some gameplay footage on YouTube if you don't, and you'll see that that's not at all what it looks like anymore. In fact, it resembles something that looks graphically like a midpoint between your typical Rec Room world and VR Chat world, and sometimes even better when we're talking about specifically what these platforms look like on standalone, not on a PC.
Yeah, so I don't know if I want to go. Yeah, I do want to go off topic here because there's a lot of comments here talking about the topics I want to talk about here. And I love Chris Richardson's saying, I don't like how the Quest interface presents when you don't have a connection. Standalone devices should work standalone, not with blank icons if you aren't online. I've experienced this myself. And earlier in this, sorry,
just
go ahead,
one
David.
quick thing, and I will let you talk just on that specific issue. Quest firmware data miner Simulia, I think, or it may have been Luna themselves. It either was Luna sharing a finding of someone else, or it could be Luna's themselves, said that they have indication that in a couple of versions from now, the Horizon OS is actually going to cache app icons offline, because that is a very janky thing, but it looks like they are actually working on solving that exact problem.
Yeah, wonderful to like complain in real time about this thing that makes you feel disconnected constantly in this studio. But this is the topic that's speaking right to my heart. So earlier in this show, at the beginning, I connected, and like I said, I had my Raspberry Pi up here, and I've got this Logitech mouse with a button on the bottom that connects Bluetooth to 3 different devices. So I compare that Bluetooth mouse to the Quest. I compare it to the Pi, and I can compare it to a third machine if I really want to. Well, I was using a big screen up here, and I had it connected, the mouse connected directly to the Pi, and I'm like, I want to go back to connecting it to the headset. And so I press the button on the bottom. I look into the headset, I flip the mouse over, I press the button on it to switch it to input 2, put the thing back down, and I'm looking around waiting for my mouse cursor to basically pop up in VR here to move between these 3 displays, and it just never comes up. The headset just chooses at this particular moment not to make that Bluetooth connection. to the headset. Well, how many times has our audience known that? Like, we've got one of the wizards of the world in our audience, in Geek Odin, who solves Wi-Fi connection issues with his software in his sleep, basically. But I will always prefer and have love in my heart for a wired connection because of the magic it can feel like the if you have a high-end gaming mouse and you input that over USB to a Steam Deck, and then you go play Doom or one of those really twitchy 90s shooters, it'll feel so darn responsive and fast, exactly like you remember it feeling back when you played it in your preferred system with your preferred input methods, right? Like, you've got to have a way to fall back to wired solid connections and make use of the PCs around you. And yeah, wireless is all beneficial on top of that. But when I start talking about wireless, like that, the issue being talked about by Chris Richardson there, like, the headset should still operate even when it's offline. One of the most freeing feelings in the world is to turn Bluetooth and Wi-Fi off of a VR headset, and then turn Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off of the device it's paired to, and still get on the internet, or sorry, still get on to a game, and still get on to writing something on your big screen, and to realize you don't need anybody else out there in the world to tell you what you're doing on your headset.
I think there's two issues being conflated here, right? And we really have got very off topic, but there's two issues definitely being conflated here, which is wireless connection in general. You know, one device connecting to the other wirelessly, and then internet connection, and those are two very different things, right? The logos thing, the icons thing, sorry, is just an issue with the headset. Always tries to load the icons from the internet, so if it doesn't have internet access, it's not going to. It doesn't matter if you've got it wired to a home network if that home network's not connected to the internet. I think, you know, when it comes to the wireless thing in general, I think we've discussed last week. We discussed this quite extensively. I think we both definitely disagree on this. You can find mice that use a custom wireless protocol, and if you pay a good amount of money, yes, there are a lot of cheap wireless mice out there that don't work well, sure. But if you're the kind of gamer you're talking about, you can afford or want to buy a high-end mouse that uses a custom 2.4 gigahertz protocol, not Bluetooth. I see some people saying Bluetooth's never going to solve this, but the high-end mice don't use that. They use their own custom wireless protocol that's incredibly low latency and high responsiveness. And some of these mice are updating it like tens of thousands of times per second. It's really, there's no practical difference between wired there.
Well, it was I started hooking up the HDMI link, and I kept seeing comments from people who were saying it's just too laggy for my gaming uses. And then we immediately saw people hooking up their drones through HDMI link and flying their drones around their houses using the exact same tool set, right? Like, it's great to iron out latency of your system at every possible avenue, and there's certain people for certain cases where even milliseconds of latency matter.
So the thing is, there shouldn't really be a dramatic difference in latency between wireless streaming and MetaQuest HDMI link. And I'll tell you why, because this isn't actually a raw uncompressed signal. What a capture card does, which you need for Quest HDMI link, is compresses the raw signal, be it HDMI or DisplayPort, so that it can be transported over USB and then decoded on the device, in this case the headset, in other cases a PC. So you're doing the exact same thing than if you wirelessly stream, right? When you stream your monitor of using virtual desktop or MetaQuest remote desktop or any of those software, right, it's doing the exact same thing. The only difference is the link, USB versus Wi-Fi, but those aren't the main source of latency. The source of latency is encoding and decoding the signal, the video stream in the first place. So you actually wouldn't see a dramatic difference in latency unless you had a very poor wireless network. And with Wi-Fi 6E getting cheaper and cheaper now, and Wi-Fi 7 arriving in Pico 4 Ultra soon, and surely other headsets in future, I just think this isn't going to be a huge issue. We're at the point where, like with Wi-Fi 7, you're getting the same latency and higher bandwidth than most USB connections.
There's just I also deal with I also deal with interference, and you don't want interference when you're doing work. You don't want your tether to the larger internet to stop you from like getting to Google Docs if that's your platform of choice to do your editing. That's why there's always a need for local tools. Um, what is Guy Godin saying? Encoding plus decoding adds like 20 seconds of
Yeah, so
20 milliseconds of latency where
that's
the
over his
network.
earlier. So there's two comments there from Guy Godin. He's first saying network is about 3 to 5 milliseconds, and encoding and decoding is 20 or above milliseconds. So it just shows you there that the real source there is the encoding and decoding. Now, theoretically, right, if a Quest 4 had DisplayPort in, right? If it could actually take a raw DisplayPort or HDMI signal in, you get rid of that latency, right? Just in the same way that if you're using like a PSVR headset like a Valve Index, you don't have encoding or decoding latency because it's just taking a raw signal in. Theoretically, you could build a device like that, right? It would cost more. They would have to increase the bill of materials. That's how X-Rail glasses work. They take in a raw DisplayPort or HDMI signal and they project that onto a floating virtual screen. You get rid of that latency, but that's not what we have here with Quest HDMI Link. You still get that encoding and decoding latency.
Consider me in favor of a Nintendo Switch Zero. So a gamepad in your hands that you can stick cartridges into and then have it broadcast wirelessly over AirPlay or casting to your wireless device near, your display device nearby, or just plug in a cable from your gamepad to your headset or your other display device and you're good to go. I would like that very, very, very much. And I know there's lots of like third party home built sorts of things that do that sort of idea, but that's what we're moving towards. Like VR headsets can eat screens, and consoles is one of the very first things. Bosworth, I think, even said in his AMA recently that the way he learned about the HDMI link feature in was someone showed him a Nintendo Switch being ported into the headset wirelessly, which is a big thing. I like Guy Godin saying that all these latency hops keeps his app useful. I'm going to make the case to you, Guy, that I want a flat version of your app somehow in order to move files from a PC into my Quest. Like I need some way of moving files from the screen that's up here into my headset or from the headset into the screen.
Yeah, I think we broadly do what we do agree on is this idea of these mixed reality headsets and eventually AR glasses turning physical screens into software and extending your existing devices or your apps rather than the actual devices themselves, your favorite apps from those devices onto whatever size screen, wherever you want, on the go or in your home, wherever you are, turning screens into software. I think it's just our only slight disagreement there is that you want your screens to be brought across over a wire and I want mine to be done wirelessly. So I think we're ready to move on to the last topic here, this major big topic that's the title of our video. Unless there's anything else you want to discuss before that?
No, I think this last subject is going to take us around a little bit to different subjects, bringing back and going full circle with some of the things that we've been talking about. I've spent some of this show talking about a compute keyboard, basically, and I just joked, basically talked about a compute gamepad. The idea of a compute gamepad would be pretty cool. Now let's talk about the idea of a compute puck and what that represents to VR.
Yeah, so we have two major reports here from the information. One released on Friday and the other yesterday, if I have my time zones correct. And so that first report indicated that according to sources within Meta cancelled the Quest Pro 2 that it had planned for 2027. So if you remember, a few weeks ago in this show, we discussed the information's reporting that Meta planned two Quest 4 models for 2026. So presumably a Quest 4 and Quest 4S, just like they're set to do with Quest 3 and Quest 3S. Then a year later in 2027, a Quest Pro 2, codenamed La Yoiha. I hate that I can never remember how to pronounce this. The point is, regardless of how you pronounce it, it was originally leaked to The Verge in a 2023 Meta hardware roadmap. That same roadmap described Quest 3 and Quest 3S. So we have every reason to believe that that was a real leak. And that roadmap suggested that it was sort of very far out. That was back in 2023, that roadmap. And that it would keep the original Quest Pro's rear battery design, so the batteries on the back of the head, and feature codec avatars as well as high resolution to screens. Now, this new report suggested that it was actually going to have high resolution micro OLED displays similar to Apple Vision Pro, but Meta wanted to keep the headset's price below $1,000. And so they decided that wouldn't be possible with these kind of screens, even by 2027, and they decided to can it. Andrew Tech telling me it's pronounced La Jolla, the code name of this headset. So the Quest Pro 2 cancelled. Now, before we talk about the next report, we will just bring up a post that Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, made on Threads, if I can get this to load. Yes, here is the post where he did want to point out this. We have to point out this is the CTO of Meta saying that we have many prototypes in development at all times, but we don't bring all of them to production. We move forward with some, we pass on others. Decisions like this happen all the time, and stories based on chatter about one individual decision will never give the real picture. Now, of course, he is the CTO of Meta. At the same time, that means that he is going to present this information in a specific way. You could read this as, if you are a kind of favorable to Bosworth, you could read this as clarification. If you are taking a more skeptical approach, you could read this as damage control. For example, previously, it had been reported that the Quest Pro 2 that had been planned for 2024, the original candidate for Quest Pro 2 had been cancelled. And Bosworth came out at the time with a very similar statement to this. So you can say, sure, look, it's true. They have many prototypes in development and some don't go forward. But the reality is the reporting was right. There is no 2024 Quest Pro 2. It's canned, that specific headset. Now, that doesn't mean that there will never be a Quest Pro 2. But I think if you look at the range of reporting from The Verge's Alex Heath to the Information's Wayne Ma, people who have accurately reported Meta's moves multiple times in the past, it is quite clear here that there is, that it does seem that the Quest Pro 2 candidate for 2027 has been cancelled. And you'll note that there is no denial here in Bosworth's post. It is more just there's always different headsets. So we kind of discuss that now, or we can go on and talk about what headset Meta greenlit instead?
Why don't you get into that? Because I want to take us to a lot of places after we get through that.
Yeah, let's just get all the news part out there, and then we can talk about our analysis of it. So following this report on Friday, a few days later, yesterday, we get a second report from the Information saying that in the same meeting that Zuckerberg and Bosworth cancelled that Quest Pro 2, they greenlit a very different headset, codenamed Puffin. And so this headset is apparently a bulky pair of glasses that weighs less than 110 grams, yet it's an opaque VR-style headset with pancake lenses and pass-through cameras of the same fundamental type of Quest headsets. But how it apparently achieves this dramatically lower weight is by separating both the battery and the computing hardware into a tethered puck that Meta's engineers hope will be pocketable. So just to quickly underscore how crazy that claim is of less than 110 grams, that's like bizarre, okay? Quest 3, even if you take off the facial interface and straps, just the actual front box itself weighs 400 grams. So with those, it weighs 515. Of that, the battery is only 70 grams. So there's a lot of weight they are still managing to shave off if this report is accurate. In fact, this would even be lighter than a Big Screen Beyond. Big Screen Beyond is around 130 grams. And they're claiming in this report that Meta's Puffin headset is going to come in at around 110 grams or lower. Now, I think a way that they may be able to achieve this in some ways is to use an open periphery design. So they wouldn't have a facial interface. This would be designed to sit on your face like a giant, really, really bulky pair of glasses. And The report, to be clear, claims that this headset will not use controllers. It will instead use the eye tracking gaze and pinch input scheme introduced by Apple Vision Pro. And the thing that this headset really reminds me of when you look at its description of the form factor, of the focus, virtual screens and entertainment, right? Virtual monitors for productivity, virtual cinema screens for entertainment, is Immersed's visor. And we won't talk about that too much today because I'm actually scheduled to see it in person and try it on September 19th. But if you look at the way that this headset's described, I think it sounds like it will be a lot closer to the visor form factor than what we see in any Quest headset. And the simple piece of analysis I will put here before we get in deeper is that I actually suspect that this thing will either be branded something like Quest Air or maybe not even branded Quest at all. This may be intended to be a product line that sits between AR glasses and Quest, something that is a lot lighter, a lot simpler, with the massive trade-off of the compute puck, and designed for having your virtual 2D screens and your basic spatial apps, not for playing Asgard's Wrath 2 or Steam VR.
Yeah, we've got a lot to see in the next month or two that's going to shape our thoughts for the future. The context I'm going to start here with is the sense that anytime Meta has ever shown off hardware, I felt like, and I'm meaning specifically to press and media influencers, anytime I've ever been in a press demo to check out Meta hardware, I've always felt I'm being studied, quite literally by the Meta Facebook people in the room. You come out of the headset and they ask you, "What did you think?" I saw this firsthand with Mark Zuckerberg himself after trying the Quest Pro 2. Quest Pro, not the Quest Pro 2. After trying the Quest Pro back when it was announced, he was the first person to come and ask questions of the journalists gathered to ask him questions, right? Like they're constantly data gathering, and they're constantly choosing different directions to go on that are difficult. So I'm appreciating a lot of the comments here talking about how it was like a mistake to call this a Quest Pro 2 so many years before it would have even been named. At the same time, you have to push back on that idea. Meta renames products that are already released years after they've been released. Like, I'm still sporting the Oculus Quest Pro. I booted that up, and that's still the name in the file system for this headset that is named after a company 2 companies ago, right? Like it's silly how they rename their products. So you've got to pick some point at which to say, okay, this is a product that's been out. This is where they're trying to go in the future. And that's the more important, interesting thing here of what does it say about Meta's design propositions long term for them to realize they actually need to go with a puck. Did they is the idea that they're going to actually ship a puck powered VR headset an admission that they had some bad ideas on the Quest line?
So I actually think your first contention was probably more accurate here in that this is likely to be a real world test. We know that this is, as you say, how Meta does things. The original Oculus Quest and Rift S were released alongside each other as a real world public consumer product A/B test of which product would be more successful, which would people choose, which way does the market want to go. And obviously the answer was Oculus Quest in the end. If timelines here are accurate, we would see a Quest 4 coming out in 2026, and then this thing. So to be clear, what I have up right now is a render of Visor Immersed's headset. This is not in any way claimed to be Meta's headset. I'm simply putting it up because it's the kind of form factor that this report describes. I want to make that very, very clear. But so whatever this 2027 headset's called, I saw a comment earlier asking why would they call it Puffin? That's the code name. The code name is Puffin. It's not going to be called Puffin as a product. Whatever this ends up being, they would then have 2 headsets on the market, right? One would be this Quest 3 with a bunch of upgrades, a Quest 4, right, which presumably, based on reports we've seen so far, would have the compute and battery in the visor like all of the mainline Quests so far. So you have your Quest 4 out there. Then a year later, you have this thing that comes along. And I think this is going to be, I think, as far as I know, this is a massive debate within Meta. This idea of should the battery and compute be in the headset, on the rear, in a puck. It's the biggest debate in the industry, and I am very much so aware that there is a massive debate within Meta. And I wonder if this is an exercise in finding out from the market which is the right answer, because Meta doesn't care about the esoteric discussions of which is better. They care if they have this product out in the wild, how many sells more, which product sells more, and which product gets used more. That's all they will look at. They will look at the data and they will proceed with what works. And I think that's exactly what this will be. A headset that is that light would be designed to answer the question, is the fundamental thing that is holding mixed reality headsets back from mainstream public adoption that they are these thick, heavy bricks on your face that are half a kilogram and hurt to wear? And it's answering the question, if we shipped a headset that had some of the core capabilities with, pass through that can show wide field of view compared to AR glasses or birdbath optics, virtual screens, basic immersive apps, will this be the thing if it's in a light headset that pushes this technology into adoption? If it's sleek and light, even if you have this compute puck, will people accept that trade-off for a headset that they could wear on a 5-hour flight and not within an hour say, damn, my face hurts, I want to take this thing off? Because if you're someone who is currently a VR enthusiast who is happy to wear these headsets, you have to realize that there's a certain selection effect going on here, where you're the person who originally put one on and thought, this isn't too bad, I'm okay with this. But there are plenty of people who still today, if you put a Quest 3 or even worse, a Vision Pro on their headset, on their head, it doesn't matter how good the experience is because it hurts their face. And if we are stuck in this era of 500 gram, 600 gram headsets, that's not going to change. I think Big Screen, their argument as a company with their hardware was exactly this, that the fundamental thing holding these headsets back is their size and weight. They have this philosophy at Big Screen's hardware division saying every gram matters and it matters more than all of these other specs. I think this is Meta saying, okay, we'll test this hypothesis. Let's put this into a product and see how it goes, if this does become a product eventually.
So a lot of really active comments. I want to thank you to everyone, all of our regular viewers, people who have tuned in with us on this journey, have heard, know that we're, we're telling consistent story here over the years of VR slowly, slower than we all expected, drilling its way into the foundations of personal computing. And I want to say thank you to our longtime viewers, to all the new viewers who are like, what the heck is this? We get near the end of our shows, we tend to get a lot of those people in for the first time who are just popping in because they see lots of people watching this stream. So do hit like, do share this out to everyone. And to recap for those new viewers, these are Meta avatars. We are wearing Quest 3 headsets. David Heaney is in London. I'm in New York City. And we feel like we're present. And we've been doing this every week for years now, coming together and having in-depth discussions about the next generation of personal computing, even with these silly avatars. Now, you can go into an Apple Vision Pro, and we could be represented as almost photorealistic digital humans, David over there, me over here, and it would look entirely different than this because of how we would be represented as avatars. Well, this is what we're able to do on consumer hardware that's going to be just as cheap as $200. You can go and get a Quest 2 headset for $200, put it on your head, come into the studio and be represented like this with quality hand tracking, getting your hand movements. This is the journey we've been on, covering this for 10 years, and it is an enormous trend to see it all coming together. You want to talk about any comments before I get off of that?
Yeah, I think I want to bring it back to the discussion about these headsets and, talk about that. Or is that something you want to bring up, or you want to wait for a while and then talk about it?
I wanted to talk a little bit about Apple and what opportunities are available to Apple.
These Meta headsets, and then we can move on to talk about that. So, we have some commenters here rightly pointing out that there are headsets that are heavy and still comfortable. And this is a very interesting design space because what you can do to make a headset that has hefty weight on the front, heavy, feel comfortable, is you can just put more weight on the back and counterbalance it. And people have pointed out that Valve Index did this, Quest Pro did this. Presumably, the cancelled Quest Pro 2 would have done the same based on the report. And we see this in Pico 4. You can get a custom head strap for your Quest headset today, or Meta's own official, albeit overpriced, Elite strap. And you can counterbalance the weight. And that actually can work for a lot of people and give you a headset that's comfortable wear for hours. The problem is you can't lean back on a sofa, on a chair, on an airplane, on your bed. When you have something padding the back of your head, that's great for active standing up room scale gaming where there's nothing behind your head. But that falls apart on the other use cases that this product, I imagine, will be focusing on, which is the use cases of Apple Vision Pro. And what we're really seeing here in a way is almost this divergence of mixed reality headsets between being optimized for different use cases. There are kind of two clear categories of use case. One is this immersive gaming and fitness, right? You have everything from Beat Saber to Half-Life Alyx to Asgard's Wrath to that's this one category. And for that, sure, you can have a successful product that just counterbalances the weight because you're never lying down. But then there's this other category of use cases that are just starting to emerge. And Apple Vision Pro is arguably the first headset to do it well. And it's so expensive that almost no one can afford it or justify it. And that's in what we keep talking about in this show, turning screens into software, right? These virtual monitor use cases. But once you do that, a huge advantage of that is that ability to go on an airplane and lie your head back, or be in bed, or lie on your couch, or sit on your patio and lie back in a deck chair and have a giant screen playing your Steam games while you have your gamepad in your hand, right? This ability to have whatever size screen wherever you want at any time. And that just can't work if there's a padding on your head. So that's where this massive design trade space comes. And that's why I kind of speculated at the start of this discussion that this other headset, this codename Puffin, would be almost a separate product line and may even be not even branded Quest, right? We could see this thing be called like, I don't know, like MetaGlass or MetaView or something like that, a completely different product line that, yes, perhaps runs Horizon OS, but maybe a more streamlined Horizon OS, because this report claims this headset will not have controllers. It will just be focused on eye tracking and hand tracking. So you wouldn't even be able to play those kind of games, just like Apple Vision Pro makes that same trade-off. And I actually think that the irony is that Quest Pro 2's cancellation report on Friday was reported by many other outlets, especially the wider tech media, as Meta canceling its Apple Vision Pro competitor. And I actually think that that's comically wrong, because in fact, that Quest Pro 2 with its big, thick rear battery couldn't be the right form factor for Apple Vision Pro consumer competition. And ironically, what we see in this codename Puffin headset is a direct competitor to Vision Pro, something that could focus on these use cases and fix Vision Pro's biggest problem, which is that it's very heavy and uncomfortable. Apple only offloaded the battery, not the compute. But the one thing I also want to point out is that offloading the compute to a puck has major trade-offs if you want it to be pocketable. You could offload to a compute box that's not pocketable, and you could have the same performance, or even if it's a giant big thing, better than a standalone headset, a fully tetherless headset. But if you want something that fits in your pocket, that has battery and computing power, and can actually run for more than 5 minutes without overheating and burning your leg off, not literally, of course, just in terms of how hot it feels, you're going to need to actually have lower performance. So I would expect, as I said at the start, this thing to be in a category between glasses and headsets. What Immersed is really cleverly naming a visor. I think that's a very kind of interesting name for these categories of products. Unfortunately, one company's taken it as their product name, so we'll just have to say Ultralight headsets for now.
Okay, so now I want to talk about the Apple opportunity and just think about the way these ecosystems are taking shape. I love the Ray-Ban glasses. I think they're incredible. They're capturing really, really, really neat moments in public that I would not be able to film any other way. I've put examples out there in multiple articles. I've used them for work to capture interviews and demos of things that are like next generation ideas where you've got sensors on the glasses to recognize hand movements and stuff like that. Very, very cool ideas. What I would like to see are those that give you your prescription and then fit into a VR headset right in front of the lenses of the VR headset. They dock together. That would be a pretty ideal scenario for me to imagine these camera glasses that also talk to your phone for AI assistance, and then dock into your VR headset to give you your prescription lenses inside a full canvas of VR that lets you see everywhere and everything. Like it lets you fill up your space with screens, like you just discussed in that previous situation. It also sounds a little un-Apple-like, right? To have this thing where one device docks into another device, but it what I'm describing is some of the trade-offs that we are starting to see in some of the high-end products line. Like we noticed Vario, a $10,000 device has an eye box that's shaped to wear glasses as you put this monstrous thing on your face. And then all of our comments have told this theme of needing to lose weight off of the VR headset too. Like that's extremely important. Uh, the where this gets really, really interesting is you start imagining every device around you operating in headless mode. You imagine the laptop without the screen on, the Steam Deck with the screen turned off, your iPad with the screen turned off, a keyboard that doesn't have a display on it, a watch that gives you the touch screen on the watch but doesn't actually display anything for anybody else, a phone that operates as a media center for everything that's on your headset, but the phone screen stays off, so it stays in a cooler, less power intensive state than if it had that screen on. You end up with all these scenarios where the products that we had for the last 15 years now need to be rebuilt around the reality that everyone, everywhere could have a portable virtual reality display on them at any given time to make use of those portable devices. So the prescription glasses is just one example of this idea that you've got two ecosystems colliding head on. You got the Meta ecosystem and Apple ecosystem. And Meta doesn't have anything in terms of screens to ship except for the VR headset, meaning that if they go and eat somebody else's screen, it only benefits Meta, right? Where Apple has to go and make products that somehow still like make use of their existing screens, their existing hardware, their existing products. That's actually things that Meta can eat as fuel for their fire. The same, you know. So imagine the opposite scenario where you have a Meta watch or a Meta wristband. Maybe you have a Meta wristband on each wristband. And one of those Meta wristbands has a cellular connection to get you data and AI assistance from anywhere you go. Now, imagine that also feeding into the glasses to get you your AI assistance in the glasses. Imagine that feeding to the headset to get AI assistance in the headset. Imagine that data connection at your wrist also taking away videos and captures and all your social media postings. You don't need a phone in that scenario. Your watch and your VR headset and your glasses get you all the pieces that you had in Apple's ecosystem with the iPhone as the centerpiece of your personal computing ecosystem. That doesn't have to be true going into the 2030s.
Yeah, I think even without having to have another device, if this Puffin headset is very portable, there's no reason that Compute Puck couldn't have an LTE option, right? Just the way many tablets today, you can buy a Wi-Fi version or a Wi-Fi plus LTE. There's no reason, and maybe even this is going to be 2027, right? Maybe even 5G. Why not? And so that could be Meta's first kind of cellular product. If this was something that's so portable, you can put it into a case that's only slightly bigger than your Ray-Ban case, that your puck and the cable and the headset all fit in together, and then you can use this as like a complete computing device. I still don't think it's going to be quite to the point there with the headset that you'd want to replace your smartphone. This is still going to be more akin to carrying around a tablet with you. But eventually, yeah, one of the key features you imagine they'll eventually add to the Ray-Ban glasses, and eventually the Hypernova HUD glasses, and eventually the AR glasses, is of course their own LTE connection, because that means that, as you say, Meta severs that requirement to have your iPhone or your Android phone in your pocket with you. But we're still quite a far away from that, right? Because the Meta Ray-Ban glasses today, they have very little compute on board. The vast majority of tasks they offload to your phone. It doesn't even run Messenger or WhatsApp on board. It's actually just piggybacking off your phone. It doesn't run Spotify on board. It's piggybacking off your phone. I think it's clear based on the reporting we've seen that the Ray-Ban glasses without any kind of display will continue to evolve as its own product line without displays. And that's the kind of features that it looks like Meta will eventually want to kind of roll in there, putting more and more of the tasks on board. So eventually you can just walk out of the door with your glasses on and do all of these different tasks, be it Messenger, WhatsApp, text messages, regular phone calls, Spotify, and maybe call an Uber and have a voice interface, in the same way that if you have an LTE Apple Watch today, there are plenty of apps that actually run on device. Like you can load Apple Music and download some playlists, or if you have LTE, you can just stream them off without ever bringing your iPhone out. I think that's something Meta will want to do, but they're going to have to wait on new generations of chips from Qualcomm. And Qualcomm is going to be working as hard as they can to put more and more compute into these tiny little stems of glasses.
Yeah, very, very interesting discussion here. We have to see what products come together. I think that the reason I focus so much on this, and David, you were so, I love that you added that at the end there, that the smart glasses displayless product line are likely to continue into the future. That's a powerful, meaningful thing to think about, right? Like, we've been told, like, there's a lot of people in our audience that saw the $3 billion or whatever that Magic Leap raised and assumed, oh, that's right around the corner. That's the natural next evolution of VR headsets. And what have we seen? We've seen that miss again and again. Like, it's not worked. And here we are with Meta realizing that actually, if you put a really good camera on there and you lower the latency of the voice detection as low as possible, you've got a product that has real sticking power. And I turn the AI off on my glasses. I don't need them or want them most of the time, at least right now, even though a lot of people are going to get tons of use out of them. They're a great product even without the AI turned on.
Sure, but the original Ray-Ban stories kind of did the same thing. Not as well, but they were camera glasses with these audio features. I think what's really been selling the Ray-Ban Meta glasses in the US, at least, is this AI capability. And that is, from Zuckerberg's own mouth, what makes him optimistic about this as a product line, even without screens, is Meta AI. I mean, he said this on 5 different podcasts now. I've listened to all of them. He said this, that the reason that this is now going to be this massive product category is Meta AI, because of the advancements in large language models that have allowed these things to become pretty much the ultimate AI wearable, right? There's nobody who would say that there's a better AI wearable today than the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. The Humane pin is a joke in comparison, and the Rabbit R1 is a toy. And I expect we will see a huge number of Meta AI on glasses announcements at Connect. I think this will be a huge focus for them to give it agentic capability, right? Right now, it's a question box. You ask some questions, you can get it to maybe translate some things, but what happens when it can do things for you, right? Even the most basic fundamental things at the start, like set a timer, right? That's an example of the most basic agentic function. But eventually you're going to want to be able to do things like call you an Uber, as a basic example.
Yeah, the idea here in the comments by Shala saying that there could be 3 tiers to them: no screen, a HUD screen, and then full AR.
Absolutely.
That's what Zuckerberg, or that's what he believes, right? Or that's what they're currently thinking out deep into the future. Is that right, David?
Yes, exactly. That's it. You have the cheapest one is just the Ray-Bans that evolve, right? Audio, no display. Then you get this middle tier that's a HUD, a heads-up display. You get your notifications. You can get an answer from the assistant without it having playing audio, right? You speak your question, but you see the answer as text. And then eventually you get this third tier of glasses that are these full augmented reality glasses that can put virtual objects in your space and augment some of the real objects in a very basic way.
So, what I want to argue or contend, we'll see if history uh, catches me as accurate or really wrong here. That last category, the AR one, is the one I question, the full AR one. I can see the value in a couple lines of text, right, for translation. So you can see quietly a text translation right in front of you of anything you see or anything you hear. That would be a pretty neat superpower to have via heads-up display. The camera glasses, I'm already using them. I love them. They're fantastic. What I question is the third category, where you've got all day full holographic visuals in front of you, wherever you look in a wide field of view. That's the category that I really breaks my brain in relation to the things we get out of VR headsets. Um, what I just described earlier, David, where you imagine your watch with the LTE connection, imagine your smart glasses out for real world use, connecting to the LTE connection, and then imagine your VR headset for real power use, right? Where you want to go in, focus on, tune out the real world, tune in the VR world, and use the space around you.
Indoors at home for the same reason that you might have a phone that you use all day and then a laptop in your backpack. But the one thing I would point out about this third tier of glasses, these AR glasses, is that for them, the three tiers become modes. And for basic battery reasons, the fact that you say, all day holographic objects, all day virtual objects, that's not going to happen for battery reasons. So for a lot of the time, these full AR glasses are going to feel exactly like the Ray-Ban glasses because you'll have all of the display off, and you'll only have the display turn on for notifications, for which it will be a HUD and not even initiate tracking. And then tracking will only initiate alongside the display when you're displaying virtual objects. So for those power reasons, these tiers will actually be like levels of capability and modes of these AR glasses. And one thing I just want to point out in the comments, because there's been some confusion here about the fact that these reports now indicate that Meta will release AR glasses in 2027 and mixed reality glasses, Puffin being these mixed reality sort of heavy glasses. So that's quite confusing, and in some ways I'm sure that will be confusing, but I think it'll become clear when you look at the capabilities of these products, what they are, right? That these Puffin glasses are going to feel much more like what you get today when you put on a Quest 3 in terms of the full like Horizon OS fully featured operating system. Whereas when you put on these AR glasses, it's going to feel like a very stripped down OS. The difference between using like a smartphone and a smartwatch, where you see this very basic power optimized OS. And the other ironic thing is that despite the fact that the mixed reality glasses, the Puffin glasses, are going to be much more capable in many ways, wider field of view, more computing power likely, just a better overall visual experience, they'll probably be cheaper because the technology needed to do real transparent optics that aren't using pass-through cameras but are actually adding pixels onto glass or plastic is actually much more expensive. So that'll be a very weird situation where the cheapest thing will be your Quest 4, right? Which is just, the bulkiest thing, and the biggest thing is the cheapest. And then it'll actually get more expensive as you get smaller when it comes to technologies that are capable of displaying virtual objects. And that'll be kind of a strange irony there.
The idea there that there are different modes of power consumption is a really interesting one. However, I still think about these next 2 years, right? How do we get to 2027? What happens between now and then? Our audience is broken about that idea of that timeline, right? How does Meta lose its lead? How far out is it? What does Apple and Meta, what do they do in the interim? And how good does that all fare compared to what Meta's doing?
So yeah, this is an article I want to do at some point, just putting together the different reliable reports that kind of paint what are the roadmaps for these companies in the near term. And so from what we've seen from the reliable reporting, which is, The Verge's Alex Heath, The Information's Wayne Ma, these people who have accurately reported Meta's roadmaps repeatedly in the past and being right over and over, is that what we expect in around a month or two is a Quest 3S, a cheaper version of Quest 3. Then what we expect in 2025, next year, is HUD glasses, that middle tier of capability for transparent optics, where you do get, that line of text, maybe some framing, or maybe like a little preview, a little tiny thumbnail preview for the image you just took, your notifications, your translation, as you say, all of these little contextual pieces of information. These HUD glasses, right? Meta's first glasses that aren't partnered through Ray-Ban reportedly. And then in 2026, you get these two models of Quest 4, the same form factor concept as Quest 3, just probably, lighter, thinner, more powerful, and higher resolution, maybe adds eye tracking. And you get a kind of cheaper model and a more expensive model, probably $300 and $500 or whatever inflation makes that equivalent to by 2026. And that looks like what the next 2 years will be. And then in 2027, you start to see these very different products, or 2028, because these things could very much so get delayed. We're talking about the current plans and, the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say.
Remember the time when Steve Jobs started using the term post-PC to describe the era that came after iOS launched? It was referring to iPad OS, or it wasn't called iPad OS for a while, wasn't it? I think it was a branch of iOS for a while. I could be wrong. I'm misremembering that.
Yeah, it was just iOS.
Yeah. So you had this idea of post PC. I do think we are moving post phone. I do think it's happening. The problem with that argument is that the phones won't go away. Right? They will still be there. They'll still be useful for various purposes. But their purposes and what you do with them are going to change. And I see this already in Apple's operating system. The phone is becoming more of a remote control for the devices around you. You get overlays when you aren't even using the phone to command some of the things around you. That gets better when you've got wearables all the time. And I think it's so important. I've got to come back to this idea, like, how many people are sick of their phones in some way, shape, or form? Like, how many people have lost control of the notifications coming into them over spam messages, over regular calls, or spam messages over email, or marketing messages coming over their push notifications through the app systems that were 15 years old? You could, if you wanted, start fresh today using that ecosystem, one of these ecosystems that I'm talking about, right? Get a cellular capable watch, toss the phone away or take it offline, connect it to your headset, only put the apps on here on your watch that you actually want notifications from to come and talk to you in VR. And a VR headset is a wonderful, focused machine if you really don't multitask in it.
Sure, but again, we have to make this important distinction between indoors and outdoors, right? You're not going to wear your Quest 3 walking down the street, but you're right. No. You will wear your smart glasses, right? You said your VR headset.
David, yes. Okay, I need to go back to this. This is a really important thing I've talked to a couple people about. Those influencers did enormous disservice to VR at large, showing people walking down the street in Apple Vision Pro. That is not a real world use case. No one is doing that. You're absolutely right, David. But cafes and libraries and buses and airplanes.
Sure, but you still need to be able to, get a text from your wife while you're walking to the cafe or something like that. You still need some sort of portable computing, and it's not going to be your VR headset. It's going to be your smart glasses or your HUD glasses or your AR glasses, and
or your watch and your glasses is what I'm getting at.
Of course, yeah. As you say, let's talk about this post-phone era, because I don't think it's going to be one moment, and I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be one moment, but it will be a gradual transition. And as you point out, it's already started. And the question becomes, for what percentage of the times you leave your home will you no longer take your phone? And so if you are an Apple Watch LTE owner today, as we've pointed out earlier in this discussion, that percentage is now non-zero. There are times, maybe it's just when you go for a run, maybe it's just when you go to the corner shop because you can now, use Apple Pay on your watch and you didn't bother to put your phone in your pocket. But if you have your AirPods alongside you, you can then, get phone calls, your text messages, all of that directly on your watch as a standalone computing device. So that is LTE smartwatches are the first step, the very, very start of the gradual transition to the post-phone era. And then these smart glasses and AR glasses are just going to be another step where more and more functionality of your phone becomes possible to have in without carrying around a phone. And it's just that percentage is going to start with zero, where it is for most people today. For most people today who are in any way kind of, technology users of any kind, the percentage of times they will leave their home without their phone is zero, right? For a huge percentage of people, right? And then over time, if you do get these products having more and more of these capabilities, that becomes maybe 5%, maybe it's 1 in 20 times, maybe then a few years later, 1 in 7, 1 in 5, 1 in 4, and maybe then half the time. And then one day, but decades down the line, I think, not anytime soon, you get to the point where the vast majority of people leave the home with their glasses and their wristwatch, which will obviously have a lot of these hand tracking capabilities, not their phone at all anymore. And their phone becomes something that they use for certain use cases or even don't bother to own at all, in the same way that many people today don't own a PC or a laptop.
A lot of people in our comments pointing out just the fact that lots of people don't wear glasses. I totally get that. But that's where augmentation is going to start and become beneficial year after year, like David is suggesting. Imagine the scenario. I had this question, I think, from James, because he was very curious about the Ray-Ban glasses. I did an experiment once with the Ray-Bans where I had a book in front of me and I said, read the book, or, tell me what you see. And it was obviously doing optical character recognition on what was there. And it was missing a few words. Like, it got a couple things wrong on just a book that was held right in front of me. Well, imagine if you use really advanced computer vision algorithms and pack in a little bit more of a camera sensing ability to do a telephoto lens that picks up text on the other side of a field that you can't see with your own unaided eye. So then you get to this potential of being able to say, hey Siri or hey Meta, what is that over there that I can't actually see with my eyes? Well, when you get that ability, when you get that, you might actually start using glasses. You might start wearing them. I didn't wear watches for many, many years until the ability to do some cool things with those watches popped up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. A more broad response to this question is that I heard a statistic a few years ago that the majority of Apple Watch owners upgraded from no watch. So that would be like saying before the Apple Watch comes out, oh, well, a lot of people don't even wear watches. But as Ian points out, if it gives you enough capability that it becomes useful to become, almost invaluable in your life, you will. It doesn't matter if you wore a watch before. Now your Apple Watch does all of these fitness things and lets you check your notifications without taking your phone out of your pocket or whatever you happen to use your Apple Watch for personally. So you do start wearing a watch. I didn't wear a watch and now I wear a Fitbit. In the same way, as Ian's pointing out, with one example of capabilities, this idea of eventually the camera is getting so good that you can zoom off into the distance. There's dozens of different use cases. If enough of these use cases provide enough value, then of course you will put on your pair of glasses because it will give you so many of these capabilities that are so useful. Even if it's something as simple as you're doing the chores around the house and you have a virtual screen that follows you around playing YouTube, right? Rather than having to kind of carry your phone and place it in one place and then, you turn away to vacuum this part of the room or whatever you're doing in chore wise and you're not facing away, right? Even that ability to pin a screen to your body as you do a task, it could be gardening, it could be whatever. That's a basic example of what AR glasses could do. And there's many more examples. Navigating. How many times have you gone to an unfamiliar city and you take your phone out and you try to navigate and you're kind of thinking, right, where am I on that map and where is this blue line going? Is that through that street or that street? And you're looking down with your head craned and you're walking, almost into people and you just start getting frustrated. Well, with AR glasses, you're going to see a giant floating blue arrow pointing you the direction you're going in, a kind of big circled highlight of which door you have to go in. And then you can just keep your head up and walk around in the city. And you're going to find yourself having this kind of almost frustration muscle memory where you're not going to take your phone out of your pocket and start trying to figure out the map in this unfamiliar city. You'll just have your glasses on and say, to your AI assistant of choice, navigate me to and wherever you're going, and these blue arrows will magically pop up in front of you. There are dozens of use cases.
So Pokemon Go just recently added this feature at some point for partying up with other people. And you've also got routes in there that you can make. So I made a route here in New York from a nearby street, and then it goes through Central Park, and then it ends at Central Park next to it. And I recorded that path using my phone in my hand, walking down the street corners of from one location to another. Well, it's really interesting to imagine Niantic, the company that makes Pokemon Go, now using that partying feature in much the same way with permission to pull down location data from 4 or 5 phones simultaneously, all sending the same path as you walk together across a location. There's actually they're getting access to data that Apple itself doesn't have because Apple doesn't make Android phones, right? They only make iPhones and get the data for correcting all of their maps from iPhones. Well, here's Niantic with a platform that exists on Android as well as Apple, and they can gather data from both and improve their real world mapping capabilities for exactly these use cases. If you go through Niantic's tech stack, they have you scanning public locations to build a better map. They have this routing option that's going to produce better real world maps. And then from this real world map, you're going to get all sorts of things on top of that, like all these capabilities that will come down the line. I want to talk about a couple of these specific comments that I thought were really interesting. Ross, what is the adoption of the Apple Watch? Most people I know who bought one don't wear them anymore. I agree. And I'm one of these people. And I think the feeling of people who stop using the Apple Watch is because the Apple Watch is being used for the wrong use cases. Like it's got all this bloat and software overhead to make it connect and do all these things with other devices. It's not living on its own, doing its own thing very much anymore.
Well, hold on. I got to question the premise of this because as Craig Melville replied to Ross saying there are 38 million Apple Watches sold a year. And I don't know about you, but I mean, when I go into London, I see them on every single street. I see people wearing them all the time. When I'm on a train or a bus or a plane, there's Apple Watches all over the place. Maybe you who happen to just live in somewhere where Apple Watches
No,
exist, but
what it hits me. So it's
every
biggest
street
use.
on almost every,
Okay.
on 1 in 5 wrists, if I had to guess.
And you know what it is? Its use. Well, you know what its main use is? Its main use is to give me notifications when my phone is unavailable. So I get a pop-up on my phone, or I get a pop-up on my wrist when my phone is on silent or in my pocket out of view. I look at it and I see what that notification is. Every other thing that device does is not hugely useful to me, and I don't think it's hugely useful to a lot of people out there. It runs out of power within a day on most people.
The biggest use case, as Apple has been pushing in all of its watchOS updates, is fitness, right? It's one of the most popular fitness devices in the world. When Apple put this out there, they didn't know what it was for. For people who like to track sports and activities and their runs and their walks, that seems to be the biggest use case.
David, let me bring this back. You're saying tens of millions of Apple Watches sold, and a bunch of them go into disuse after people have had them a while. Or
what's a bunch? Where's the data here?
I'm saying it sounds like another product category. All I'm saying is that sounds like another product category that I'm thinking of very fondly. It's sounding like the same criticisms of VR that are
exactly, but I don't think either of them find it. I think you get some people that stop using it, and people say, "Oh, everyone stopped using it." No,
it cuts both ways. It cuts both ways. What I'm describing is the reasons these things tend to become bricks over time. Like the Apple Watch does become a brick to a large number of people, even if plenty of people.
What's your source? What do you mean a large number of people? Like I just said, I see them every city I go to. I see probably 1 in 5 wrists has one on.
And how many wrists is it sitting in a box, just like the VR headset is what I'm getting at, right? Like
I just think both are like, if it's on 1 in 5, who cares how many didn't? Like that's a crazy number to see in public. Of all the tech products I see in public, other than the iPhone and AirPods, it's the most, like
it's such a fantastic. Like you're not wrong, but that's also not people buying apps. That's not people using it for phone calls. That's
Sure,
not.
that is the
Yeah.
biggest flaw of the watch. That what Apple never could build was an ecosystem. Originally, they wanted to have the same revenue model as the same secondary revenue model as iPhone, right? Which is so Dr. Red MD is saying neither of you have stats for your argument. I actually do. I can tell you that Apple sells more watches than every other. More watches at its price point or above than every other watch company in the world combined. All of the traditional watch companies. And this is probably why Ray-Ban wanted to partner with Meta, because they saw the writing on the wall that look what happened to all the luxury watch companies. You know, if you add Rolex and Casio and all those together, there's more Apple watches being sold than all of them at that price point or above.
I want a Pip Boy, right? I want a big giant screen on my wrist. Yeah, I loaded up Tetris onto my watch, and it was absolutely devastating that I could not pair a Joy-Con from my other hand to control Tetris on my Apple Watch. That's why the Apple Watch is failing. No, I appreciate that we don't have data. What I'm pointing out is
We do.
these are
The data, I just cited the data. They sell
I,
more Apple Watches at that price point or above than every other watch company combined.
we're talking about usage. We don't have data on usage, on how many of the people who buy and give all that revenue to Apple keep using the devices as they did on day one. How many people end up returning? What is the return rate of Apple Watches compared to all the other Apple product lines? Uh, I, I I'm pointing out, David, that like the things that Apple does well, Meta wants to do well. The things that Meta is going to do well, Apple's going to take notice of and try to do well themselves. And the overall direction here is wearable computers that do more for you. The fitness is a huge use case, and I'm seeing people defend the use cases for the watch in our comments. Fitness is a huge use case for VR headsets as well. It's exactly what we would imagine to be the intended use case of a next generation Apple device. I would expect it to be focused around fitness.
Okay, so Lil Scampy is bringing in a statistic. I haven't verified it, but according to Lil Scampy's Google search, the Apple Watch has a customer satisfaction rate of 94%. The Apple Watch has a customer retention rate of over 88%. That's the statistics I've seen, and there's no evidence that people are throwing these away en masse. Sure, you got those 12% of people, and that's millions of people, but it's only 12%.
Mm. It's funny, like you're describing the market leader in a product category that is just underutilized is I guess the argument. And I'm making the same darn argument for everything in the Meta VR headset ecosystem.
Sure.
It's a wonderful product. It's a product leading its product category, but it's hobbled in major ways by the software ecosystem that's underlying it. And I think the same is true of an Apple Watch.
I think you're right in some ways, but I actually think it's the hardware. I think the biggest limiting factor to a watch to be able to be the driver of a post-phone era is just that display, right? It's the physical size of the display. And it's almost like the opposite of the situation with glasses, right? Where with the watch, you do get a decent kind of surface area, a thicker area than you could put in to any watch stem, or sorry, any glasses stem without it looking ridiculous. But then you have this inability to have a display. And that's why you're right to say that these things could actually pair together very, very well, right? Where you have some of the compute going on the watch, but then the glasses are giving you that gigantic display. They are the ones that are able to actually take the limitation of this thing, that it's such a tiny interface to the world, and do the opposite, have an interface that's bigger than your phone. So of all that, if you have your phone in your pocket, your glasses on your wrist, and your AR glasses on your head, the AR glasses are actually providing the biggest display surface of all of these devices, while the phone has the most compute, and then the watch is kind of a balance between the different compute amounts at a much lower friction than carrying around a phone. So that is definitely the potential of these glasses that means that they can replace more of your phone. It's the watch can't replace any function of your phone that requires a screen that's bigger than a watch. Whereas for your eventual AR glasses, any kind of screen is just a piece of software. Again, that's a trend we keep saying in this discussion. It's screens become software, and that's something that a watch can't do.
Yeah, this is a very good discussion, fun one for us to talk about along with our audience. We're product designers now. Our audience are also product designers because what we're discussing are the exact decisions getting made at the highest levels of Apple and Meta, and probably Google as well. They're trying to offer everything that we're talking about in uh, multiple ways, shapes, forms, trying to get products ready for the future. I think the takeaway, David, like I don't expect most of the 21st century to be dominated by laptop computers and desktop computers. I expect them to be dominated by VR headsets and glasses. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had this image on screen the whole time. We love to show this image. We're obsessed with it because we think it just really summarizes this great that this is the kind of product that replaces your phone, and this is the kind of product that replaces your tablet, your laptop, and for some people, their desktop. Although I think we'll see desktop computers exist for a very, 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 very long time, just without their monitor. In some ways, I would say this thing replaces your tablet and your laptop, and it replaces the monitor for your PC, but not the PC itself. There is no replacement for having a large box that's drawing 500 watts from the socket. That's not going to be replaced anytime soon. Even with cloud inference, it's still going to be cheaper overall in the long term to buy your own hardware. And that's something that enthusiasts will continue to do. But yes, of course, cloud services will bring some of those capabilities to headsets without owning the PC itself. But it still will be a PC in the cloud, right?
Yeah, the use case I'm really curious about. I have yet to have this demo personally, but imagine a wristband, a watch or a wristband, one on each wrist, and then you put your hands down on a flat surface, and every time you tap a key, you get a vibration from the wrist matching the exact tapping time. I really wonder if we'll be able to get there with keyboards, or if everyone has to start fresh and learn, uh, a whole new system for typing in some other way. But we'll see. This is the demos we're likely to see very soon.
Yeah, the text input problem is a huge problem, right? Because with people were skeptical that the iPhone could do this. Some of the articles that came out when the iPhone was announced were essentially, this thing is a joke without a physical keyboard. And we now know today that smartphones are capable of actually providing a keyboard that's better than your BlackBerry. I would argue that your current iPhone 15 Pro virtual keyboard is better than any BlackBerry's keyboard that was ever released. And we may see a similar trend when it comes to headsets and glasses, where the easy solution to this, the full solution to this is to carry around a Bluetooth keyboard. But portability wise, that's not going to fly. You're not going to be, walking along in your t-shirt and shorts on a summer day and have a Bluetooth keyboard somehow fit in your pocket. So you
I might
need
do it. I might try it.
yeah, well, you might, but I don't think everyone's going to. The way that this is going to have to really be solved is some kind of software solution. And there are some solutions that we've seen, like Meta's research on a wrist device that can capture the most subtle hand movements, and then you can come up with a completely new type of keyboard based on that. The other one is just to do a flat out virtual keyboard, as you were just discussing, that you put your hands down on a desk and any surface becomes a keyboard, be it the table on your train or the little tray table on your aircraft. You put your hands down and it becomes a keyboard. The problem is, of course, that without great haptics, that's going to feel really difficult. And the bigger problem, or the more immediate problem, short term, is that the tracking needs to be absolutely perfect. You need like very, very precise hand tracking and plane tracking, surface tracking. The headset or glasses needs to know down to sub-millimeter the exact height of that table and exactly where each of your fingers are. And as you say, Ian, what a really compelling way you can increase this is to add some sort of wrist-based haptics that correspond to where each key is. You kind of have a frequency that makes your hand feel like there's a difference between each of these keys. And some people will be skeptical about this, but again, I point out people were very, very skeptical that touchscreen smartphone keyboards could ever replace Blackberries or even substitute for them. And yet they did, right? I cannot tell you how much skepticism there was around that. One of the biggest complaints you would hear at the release of the iPhone is, well, it doesn't have a physical keyboard? No, that'll never work. That's stupid.
Yeah, great discussion here, and our audience has gone to the future, imagining transporter type technology, where AGI can directly manipulate molecules in thin air, and I think that's a little bit further
I think
away.
that's
But
the
yeah,
22nd century, perhaps.
yeah, we'll hopefully UploadVR will still be there to report from the
So
Star Trek future of the 22nd century.
Chris Richardson is pointing out the one of the obvious solutions here, which is voice to text. If you had theoretically had perfect voice to text, you might argue that's a solution. The problem is, even if it's perfect, right? Even if it is absolutely perfect, zero mistakes, are you going to want to do that on a train, on a plane, in a cafe? Do you want every text message you want to send to your spouse, your friend, your work with confidential information to have to come out verbally to be heard by people around you? Probably not. And one of the advantages that Ian often points out of headsets and glasses is that your experience is actually more private than on a traditional laptop or tablet or phone, because no one can see what you're doing, right? How many times have you been on a plane or a train and seen a business person take out their laptop and open like a Excel, a spreadsheet, or a Word document that they probably shouldn't be letting other people see? And you don't look, obviously, but you notice that that exists there, and you look away. But it's still, if you were a bad actor, if you were a nefarious person, there are situations where that could go very badly for that person. And in contrast, with a headset or glasses on, you have no idea what they're doing. They have full screen privacy. So it's actually a trend towards more privacy in that sense.
Yep. And it's very difficult for people to wrap their heads around all of the different things that are happening here, right? Using the term, saying Meta is providing a private personal computer, using that in a sentence sounds bogus at its face because of the track record of Meta and Facebook, even if it's on its face true because of the way photons work, floating from a VR headset to a single person. And yeah, we've got, you can't, like, that's still going to be true. What you just described, the need to have private communications everywhere you are, is going to always be the case. And the idea that, like, the reason, like, that the very same thing I talked about earlier, these camera glasses that couldn't even read accurately a block of text right in front of it, right? Imagine the cameras getting a whole lot better. And the idea that all those cameras everywhere are doing optical character recognition on every bit of text, on every display out in public imaginable. Like, why wouldn't an oppressive uh, regime, government regime, do that? Why wouldn't you use all of the high resolution cameras all over a specific region to just suck up what's on every screen everywhere? You could go get it from the network level too. That would be great, but you're not getting the people that are off the network in that case. So if you want a really effective Big Brother, you should be doing that from all screens. Well, here's VR as a solution to this inevitability of everything you do on your screens in public being recorded by somebody somewhere. I'm not saying any of that's good, any of it's bad. I'm pointing out the overall trend here.
Don't give don't give the Chinese government ideas with that idea of using cameras everywhere to actually check your phone screen. That's an interesting thought. I've
I mean,
heard that.
it's a real security concern because
Yeah, no,
imagine you're
100%.
recording a 3-minute video on your Meta glasses, and during that 3-minute video, you forget in minute 2 that you're recording, and you go to open up your phone and you type in your password. Now you've got a recorded video in your cloud library of you entering your password that's now accessible by typing into an AI search engine, show me keyboard typing on a phone. So like you're turning this simple video you recorded of you playing with your phone out in public into an easy to use security concern where people can get into it. So yeah, it's scary, and I think of worst case scenarios. And no, I'm not advising the Chinese government, but I am trying to advise this audience of very real trends in general computing. Like there is no algorithm running through my captures or anybody's captures on the Ray-Ban glasses to blur out other people's screens. Should they? Like, I'm not, Justin. Should they? That's a
Should your
great
phone,
question to think about in the future.
Should your phone too? Well, its phone camera?
Yeah,
Should
no, it shouldn't,
CCTV
right?
and
Yeah.
should a cafe security camera? You know, these are questions that haven't really been answered.
And it's funny, like you get those footage that starts off unblurred, but the time it makes to the TV and is broadcast by media, usually various things are blurred out of the scene. Um, so lots of things to think about over the long term, and these are the trends we think about nonstop here. Thank you to David for writing that on his phone. I'm glad he's back at it. We'll be back on Tuesday with Don Hopper covering the Gamescast and all the ways we play games in VR. And then we'll be back on Thursday again with VR Download and David Heaney here at 9 a.m. Pacific on Thursdays. As I've warned in previous weeks, we are probably going to have to do some pre-recorded episodes in the weeks ahead as we travel to various conferences and have to plan out our things. So we might not always cover the very latest thing that's happened right before the studio we came in live in that case. We've got Connect coming up with major announcements, as well as a whole bunch of other headset demos that we expect in the coming weeks. We'll have the latest for you here in the studio. David and I will have a lot of great things to talk about in the coming weeks. Do consider becoming a member at UploadVR.com and supporting our work directly. Thank you to our members who have done that already. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future. And one fun fact I want to leave you with, I want to try and leave you all with a fun fact. In the 1980s, Apple had to convince its employees to use computers instead of typewriters because so many employees were saying the typewriter is just so much easier. I don't want to use this whole computer thing. I can already do this with my typewriter. That's your fun fact for today.
My Raspberry Pi is a VR typewriter. It's an $80 VR typewriter. I love it. It's fantastic. Full circle.
Thanks so much,
We'll see you in the future.